I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ecuador to introduce the statement by his head of state. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm very honored to introduce the pre-recorded statement by Lenin Moreno Garcés, the President of the Republic of Ecuador at the 75th General Assembly of the United Nations. Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished President of the General Assembly, distinguished Secretary General, Presidents and Heads of State. For many years, this Assembly has discussed cooperation, dialogue, solidarity, and the importance of scientific and technological progress and ending poverty in the world. We have also addressed the necessary and urgent strengthening of this organization and of multilateralism. The pandemic has impacted the planet, and it has moved the clock hands forward, and the time has now come to turn all of these good intentions into more concrete action. COVID has put pressure on multilateralism, and for 6 months we have faced not just a health crisis, but now also a social and economic one. Without exception, all countries have been hard hit by this deadly virus, and we cannot save lives and jumpstart the economy without the support of multilateral bodies, the support of private enterprise, academic community, and society as a whole. For Ecuador, support from international financial organizations have been fundamental in recent months. We therefore welcome calls for a multilateral response to the crisis. The director of the IMF has recognized the importance of supporting emerging economies and economies in development, and the president of the World Bank has spoken of a debt moratorium for the poorest countries. Ecuador backs and is grateful for these proposals, and we call for mid-income countries to be considered as well, because we are all facing serious economic problems. Dear friends, COVID has changed the recent history of the world and quite likely the history of our future world. Poverty has worsened, inequality and unemployment will continue to worsen, and this will impact our fulfillment of the SDGs. We are facing the risk of backsliding on the goals that we've achieved in recent years. For us, the Agenda 2030 is a state policy, and it is in line with our National Development Plan entitled Lifelong, which we have continued to defend. We insist on the need to have a strong, united, committed multilateral system which ensures financial and technical support for everyone. The pandemic has shown that technology is essential to guarantee citizens' rights, such as access to telemedicines, distance education, and teleworking. It has also shown that there is a great digital divide within our nations due to inequalities. In the post-COVID era, we will face the challenge of recovering our economies, focusing on small and medium-sized enterprises that provide jobs for thousands of people. We must offer agile and sufficient lines of credit with appropriate terms, and we must also comply with our ODA commitments. Colleagues of the world, my country underscores the work of the World Health Organization and recognizes its leadership during this emergency. We support the COVAX facility initiative to speed up anti-COVID vaccines and the existence of a repository of technologies to combat the pandemic. Only by having patent-free vaccines and technologies distributed fairly, particularly to the vulnerable and the marginalized, will we be able to save our world. The pandemic has affected all of us, but its impact has seriously affected the vulnerable groups. Confinement, lack of jobs, poverty, along with COVID, have worsened domestic violence. Women, girls, and boys have had to remain in their homes, often with their aggressors, putting their very physical and mental health at risk, and at times it has cost them their lives. Older people and persons with disabilities have also suffered disproportionately from this crisis, as have those who are at risk of greater risk of contracting the disease. In Ecuador, we have provided protection bonuses and technological support in the area of mobility devices and self-care devices. And in some cases, we have provided free, dignified housing. Along with 145 member states, we support the report a disability-inclusive response to COVID-19. We also recognize that indigenous people are vulnerable and require priority attention. Migrants have been doubly hard hit because of the pandemic. As a destination country, we are ensuring that we respect their rights. We will continue wholeheartedly to support the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. And we also call for the full implementation of the Quito Declaration on the human mobility of Venezuelan citizens in the region. Dear colleagues, the sustainable use of natural resources and climate change is an issue we cannot ignore. Limited implementation of environmental agreements will have serious, very serious economic and social repercussions. Recently, Ecuador expressed its concern at the presence of a large foreign fleet of fishing vessels since May 2020 off the Galapagos Islands. We have reiterated that regardless of the flag of this vessel, we will reinforce our maritime rights in this exclusive economic zone. We are aware of the enormous responsibility of protecting the Galapagos, which is the first natural heritage site of the world. We appeal to those countries who are fishing in these southeast waters of the Pacific to comply by regulations and limit their activities. Members of the Permanent Commission of the South Pacific, that is, the countries of Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, also condemn illegal fishing in zones adjacent to our country's waters. We also call for strengthening information on the location of these vessels and better monitoring and oversight. We remain committed to preserving the marine environment, and on the 11th of August, we joined the Global Alliance for the Oceans. This initiative, headed by the United Kingdom, hopes to ensure 30% of the oceans of the world will be declared protected marine areas. We are also committed to preserving Amazonia. We signed the Leticia Declaration and the so-called Financing Initiative for Sustainable Development and Bioeconomy for the Amazonia. With the creation of this multi-donor fund managed by the Inter-American Development Bank, considerable resources have been earmarked to preserve this lung of the planet and improve the quality of life of our indigenous peoples. We are facing new challenges, and we must solve these challenges together. Recently, 172 countries endorsed the Secretary General's appeal for a global ceasefire and for silencing the guns. We reaffirm this appeal and the Security Council's resolution as a first step towards achieving lasting and sustainable peace in all corners of the planet. Today, our duty is to work together to combat this pandemic. That is our common enemy. Recently, the commemoration of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings reminded us of the devastating consequences of nuclear weapons, and therefore we welcome the upcoming entry into force of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. The pandemic is one more reason to speed up our duty to disarm and to free up necessary resources for economic recovery. Dear friends, presidents, heads of states, I will conclude by saying that Ecuador firmly supports the initiative to carry out profound reform of the UN system. We need to do this to ensure greater accountability and maximize our efficiency. It is essential to review this system which we created at the end of the Second World War because it no longer reflects our current reality. It is also important to guarantee the provision of funding, and therefore states must comply with their commitment to contribute to this organization without conditions and without threats. Today, our peoples are crying out for cooperation to meet economic and social challenges in the post-COVID era. Only together can we win out over this cruel war. This cruel war has already taken the lives of almost 1 million people. Dear friends, I hope that soon, very soon indeed, we will be able to give each other a brotherly hug, both at home, in our own countries, and abroad. Thank you. On behalf of the General Assembly, I would like to express my thanks to the President of the Republic of Ecuador for the statement he has just made.